Today's video is Fashion 101. It's all the basics that you need to get your start in fashion photography. Okay, so dphog, getting into Fashion 101. It's a little bit too long for a single video, so we're going to split it in two. We're going to handle your cameras, your lenses, and genre. Genre is something that is absolutely crucial to becoming a good fashion photographer. Please don't ignore it. In the second episode then, we'll go on with finding your style and directing techniques. And I think by the end of these two, you will be a vastly improved aspirational fashion photographer. So let's talk about your camera. Fortunately, fashion isn't something like wildlife or sports where you need a specific camera body that can fire at a specific frame rate and those high-end things. Fashion, yes, there are a few bodies that are designed for fashion, like Canon's 5DS, which has the filtration removed, so you don't have a problem with moire patterns. But essentially, any camera body will shoot fashion for you. No worries in that department. I think the main consideration there is that you are shooting raw. As long as you're shooting raw, I think that's quite important, so that while you're in the learning stages, you have the ability to process your file a little bit more, to switch between color and black and white, and all kinds of little subtleties when it comes to processing your files. I have three lenses in my bag when I'm on a fashion shoot. I have the 35, the 50, and the 85. Those are my go-to lenses. Having said that, I use them for specific tasks. I guess the most traditional focal length would be the 85. In this beautiful example over here, I'm shooting with a 50mm. It just slightly on full length work. I love the 50 focal length. It just subtly enhances without distorting anything. And the 35 I will use when I want to include more story, when I want to tell a little bit more about the subject and what's making them feel the way they're feeling in these fashion shots outside of the wardrobe. So that would be location, objects inside a room. You do see some fashion tutorials out there where teachers will tell you use the wide angle lens when you are in small spaces and you're confined. It's not for that at all. If you're in a very confined space and it's not working, you're in the wrong space. The wide angle lens in fashion is there to tell story, not to get out of small spaces. That said, if you have a 70 to 200, you're fine. At the shorter telephoto length, you're covered with your 70s, your 85, 90, 100, 110, anything over there. Something slightly longer than that, you're just compressing perspective a little bit more. So there's nothing wrong if the space permits to shoot a little bit longer. Other than that, you use the focal length that matches your intent. So in other words, if you've got a wide angle lens, you don't try and shoot a serious photograph but shove it in a person's face, because it's going to distort their face. And it brings out a little bit more comedy than what it's bringing out serious fashion. So my wide angle, I won't come in close for portraiture. It'll generally be 3/4 to full length within a space that I'm using wide angle for. I'm not using it for effect on the model. If I do that, it's specifically in a studio environment, possibly to elongate the legs. That's when you'll see a lot of fashion photographers using the wider angles, is to get longer legs and exaggerate the shape of the model. Other than that, with regards to your lenses, I don't think there are any very strong do's and don'ts if you use some of these guidelines. Okay, so on to genre. For me, probably the most neglected aspect of fashion is a proper understanding of genre. In today's instant gratification photographic environment that digital has helped to foster, what we do find is that people spend less and less time schooling themselves and more time picking up a camera because it's easy just to get hold of a model on Facebook and snap away. Understanding genre is going to give you far better results in your shoots. It's going to help your model understand what they need to give you behind the camera, and it's going to help you communicate more effectively with your model. Starting with commercial fashion. Commercial and lifestyle fashion is really easy to digest. Your lighting is soft, it's gentle, it's broad, it's nothing too specific that people have to think too much about. It's generally very friendly. Hence the name commercial fashion, which means that it should appeal to the broadest possible market. For me, commercial fashion is nice. It's soft and easy, and it's a great place to start. It's an easy place to get into fashion and to get to understand what fashion is all about. What I'll generally do with my more commercial looking fashion work is I'll still try to infuse a little bit of story into it, although it's not a prerequisite of commercial fashion. Once again, commercial fashion, it's just very general, it's easy to consume, there's nothing avant-garde about it, there's nothing too intelligent about it, it doesn't ask you to think too hard, it's just easy to digest, not too much story in it. So what you will find from commercial fashion is that even if you never get published, most trends in commercial fashion will filter down to what you do as a wedding photographer or a boudoir photographer or any genre of photography that allows for private commissioning. So this is where the majority of photographers will end up, is having a successful photographic business within the field of private commissions. The reason why commercial fashion filters down to private commissions is because that's what we consume every day in the media, in magazines. Everyone is constantly looking towards those sources, and they try to imitate what is happening on those commercial fashion pages, because 9 out of 10 times your private client out there has seen that too, and that's what they're requesting from you. So to be able to really nail the current trends in commercial fashion is a really good place to be, and it's a great place to start. More than ever today though, the lines have been blurred between what is commercial fashion and what is high fashion. So something like this example over here, a lot of people would call that high fashion. In my books, it is not. It is still commercial fashion. And if you delve a little bit deeper, the reason why we've got this influx of everything being called high fashion comes purely down to marketing. Apparently, from what I gather, the Americans started it as a marketing trend. And when I say the Americans, I think it came more from the clothing designers themselves, that they started this as a marketing device, calling their labels and their offerings high fashion offerings. I think what they hope to achieve with it, it's quite obvious, to be more appealing to the marketplace. So hence photography followed, and people will call it high fashion when it's still essentially commercial fashion. In the strictest sense of the word, high fashion comes from the French term haute couture. Haute couture, to qualify, you need an atelier, which is a studio. You need to employ at least 15 people. You need to have at least 2 releases per year. And most importantly, your clientele come in and their wardrobe is bespoke fitted to them. It's not a mass-produced garment. It is something that is fitted onto each client's body. So from all of those factors, obviously the garment becomes a lot more expensive. So what happens is, the more expensive your tastes, as a generalization, the more sophisticated you are. So you're speaking to 2 completely different people. And even if you do regard yourself as being fashion conscious and you shop at Zara or wherever it may be, that is still commercial fashion. That is not high fashion. There's a big difference between the client who is prepared to pay $100 or $200 for an item and the client who is prepared to pay $1,000 or $2,000 or $10,000 for an item. You are speaking to a completely different person, and that is why You need to understand the distinction between commercial fashion and high fashion because it influences how you communicate with your photography. I try to explain it very simply as commercial fashion tells you what to think, where high fashion allows you to think. And if you can remember that distinction, I think then it guides you a little bit more in your photography, where your high fashion work becomes a little bit more intelligent. The suggestion is subtle, the nuances are increased over commercial fashion. And I think just overall, the imagery that comes out of high fashion is far more interesting, less broad appealing. You're not going to get those hundreds of Facebook likes on your high fashion work, but I think infinitely more satisfying creating high fashion work. The next distinction is beauty is not fashion. Beauty is a genre that sits all on its own. In beauty, we are focusing on skincare, hair care, makeup trends, and general grooming. That is not to say that beauty is any less demanding than fashion, although in an image like this, there's absolutely no accessorizing. There's just a simple earring and a bit of, I would guess, that is evening makeup. The hair is a little bit undone very deliberately. There's one piece of the hair that calls attention to the hair. I don't want to be too clinical when I'm shooting beauty work, but when you know that you're in the genre of beauty, the lighting is most of the time becomes a different story until you become a very talented beauty photographer. I mean, remember, these aren't hard rules. These are guidelines to get you into the industry. So everyone that's shooting some avant-garde beauty work and that are, you know, level 5, 6, and 7, and 8 above you, don't listen to those trends. You do need to get in the basic trends. And beauty, it's beautiful. It's soft, it's gentle, and it showcases those three elements: makeup, skincare, hair care. It's about grooming. And that's not to say, though, that beauty isn't fashionable. Beauty is not fashion photography, but beauty is fashionable. So you are allowed to make abstract statements. Something like this image over here, you're not going to go walking down the street wearing a face full of glitter. But we are still making an abstract statement about the fashion of beauty and where beauty is at the moment. So just to finally round off on beauty, an image like this would be about skincare more than it is about a makeup trend. We've got our model out in the sun, although this was shot in studio just with an open head reflector on the flash. The final look is that the model is out in the sun. So hence we are talking about skincare. So be specific, even within the genre of beauty. Make your distinctions on how you are shooting beauty and what you hope to achieve at the end of the day. I think this is one of my pet peeves on something like Facebook, is that people mistake or don't care to differentiate between glamour and fashion. So an image like this is not fashion. There are too many people out there who misunderstand the concept of getting a model, usually a young lady, and having her half clothed and calling that fashion. 9 out of 10 times that is not fashion, that is glamour. Now there's nothing wrong with shooting glamour, don't get me wrong here. If glamour is what you want to shoot, there's nothing wrong with that, but just understand that it is glamour and not fashion, because that will also guide you down a different route. Glamour is more concerned with showing off the sexual allure of the person. I will always go to pains inside a studio environment during the fashion shoots to never use the word sexy. I don't want to sexualize the shoot. Glamour is a genre where the end goal of glamour is to make the person sexually attractive to the audience out there. So in something like this, in terms of genre, is swimwear fashion? Swimwear is certainly fashionable, and it has fashion trends, and it probably does fall into commercial fashion, but as for these images over here, I wouldn't call it fashion and I wouldn't call it glamour. It's lookbook. Okay, lookbook is what you are shooting for either the young aspiring models or the more established models who are looking for fillers in their books. They are shooting lookbook work. Now lookbook, generally it's supposed to feel a little bit more honest and natural, because when you approach a modeling agency to look at a face, they can't be excessively made up or altered. You need to be shopping around for the model look that you need to execute a certain brief. Hence, most lookbook work will try to be a little bit more honest, and that's why it's actually a genre of its own. You are not shooting fashion, you are not shooting glamour, you are shooting lookbook, because the goal of lookbook is to give an honest, direct representation of the person that is being sold by the modeling agency. So just in a genre like lookbook, generally you will have then less makeup, less hair. As you can see in these examples, her hair is just slightly wet and tousled. Although you do have a hairstylist and a makeup artist, it's supposed to be a natural representation of the person. There's also natural light, comes into play a lot with lookbook work, and I think there's two reasons behind that. The one is so that your photograph looks relatively honest at the end of the day, and the other is that generally on lookbook stuff, it's, I don't want to say wannabe. Wannabe is a horrible word. We must stop using the word wannabe. There are aspiring photographers and aspiring models who 9 out of 10 times won't have the biggest budgets in the world to execute. So it's an easy go-to to master natural light and shoot in natural light. And it's something that you will take through the rest of your career. If you learn that as an aspiring photographer, when you one day achieve what you do want to achieve in photography, you will still be using available light at the highest level of your photography. Just closing off genre, an image like this, is it swimwear? Obviously it comes from the previous images that you've seen from part of that shoot. Is it portrait? Is it fashion? What is it? And I can't really place it specifically in any of those, but all I can say is that it is my style that I will revert back to. Those previous images, that's not my style of photography. That's things that I do for client requests, but it's not my style of work. Something like this, where I have a little bit more emotion involved in the image and it starts straying towards fashion portraiture, I think that's more my style of work. So that brings me to finding your own style as a fashion photographer. And on that note of talking about this is more my style, that's where we're going to end this first episode of Fashion 101. Look out next week, because that's when we pick it up and we start talking more seriously about your style and creating your style as a fashion photographer. So dphog, until then, happy shooting. Please do subscribe to us and we'll see you next week.